in my childhood, my mother existed as this very strong sense of beauty. I thought my mother was very beautiful. I still think so. But as a child, she was, and she was very feminine, and I paid attention to her, and that, I think that formed, had such an impression on me. My mother has flawless skin, and she would, sort of dress up, but also she has a personality. She's full of laughter and warmth, and she has a sense of humor. And as a child, she was the mother who other children said to me, "Oh, I wish your mother was my mother," because she was cool. So I think all of those things contributed to my, so it was sort of inside and outside. It's also true that in the novels, beauty doesn't solve anybody's problem, and that it's a complicated thing. I've been a reader for as long as I've been a writer. Really, both came at the same time for me. I mean, I've been writing since I was very, very young. And I do, I like writing, I like a certain kind of writing. And what's interesting to me is that we define beauty differently. So sometimes a friend of mine will read a book and say, "Oh, it's so beautifully done." And I'll read it and think, "No, it's not." But I find that I'm drawn to my own definition of beauty. I'm drawn to the beauty of sentences. I'm drawn even to the beauty of how emotion is portrayed in fiction. I find melancholy to be very beautiful. Melancholy in literature, melancholy in stories, in song, even in people. I find it very beautiful. I have only started thinking about it recently, and the truth is that I don't always feel beautiful. And I think, if anything, when I was younger, I don't know, I was a happy child. I had friends. I was popular, so I really didn't have many issues. But as I got older, I think I really, sometimes it's still very surprising to me when somebody says you're beautiful, and I think, you really think so, right? but also I think it matters more when it's somebody I care about. My father said to me some time ago, I got my hair done, and he said to me, "When you have your hair like that, you look even more beautiful." And I remember being stunned, because I thought, oh, he actually thinks I'm beautiful, and he thinks I look more beautiful. So it was, for me, actually stunning. But I think, and I like the idea of beauty, but it's not, I mean, it's nice, but it's not a central organizing principle in my life. And because I know that it's a dangerous thing for it to be, I went through a period when I wouldn't want to go out unless I was wearing makeup. And one day I realized this is actually really horrible, because it had become my way of, I don't know, I felt uncomfortable, so I stopped. So now I'll go out however I want to go out. If I'm in a good mood, I'll put on makeup. If I don't feel like it, I go as I am, and life goes on. But I think in general, beauty is I like beautiful things. Yeah, I like beautiful people. But I find that for me, beauty is in and out. Sometimes people look perfect, but I don't find them interesting. And I like beautiful things. I like detail. I like to feel that care has gone into something. So I guess it also depends on how one defines beauty. My writing space is very bare. I just want a desk and a chair, and because sometimes things can feel like clutter. But I mean, the question of what, I think that is interesting. I think when the writing is going well, I really do find it to be something almost transcendent. I find that when I feel that I'm connecting to my characters, or when I feel that in some ways the story has transported me, it's a feeling that I would certainly call beautiful. It's a state. It's a state of being. In Half of a Yellow Sun, I just deeply adored Kainene. I love that she was this woman who just lived life on her own terms and was willing to be sarcastic when she wanted to be. And so I really admired her. I mean, I made her, but I really admired her. So yeah, I do. In some ways, I think in Americana, Obinze is a very romanticized character that I clearly am in love with. And Obinze's wife, who is extraordinarily beautiful, but doesn't interest me because just not the sort of woman I find interesting. She's not beautiful in the conventional sense, but what makes her, to me, so admirable is that she's her own person. And I think that's what I most admire in women in particular. It's that the idea that a woman is her own person, she lives life. She doesn't, women who are not, for me, what Kainene represented was the idea of a woman not willing to let the world around her tell her what she should be. Because, I don't think the world tells men what they should be. It tells women quite often. And Kainene is a woman who just won't let the world, she does her thing. And I'm all over the world. And my basis for this would be women's magazines, which people might be dismissive of, but I think matters. And also advertising, just general mainstream advertising. So the mainstream idea of beauty in Nigeria, in the US, and I'm getting in Europe, for example, for women, is a certain kind of hair. So hair that grows up. It might be cool or funky, but it's not what it's not aspirational. It's not portrayed as aspirational. So if somebody were advertising something we consider as luxurious and I don't know, diamonds, whatever, you're really not likely to see a woman with a big afro. But maybe a funky jazz band, that's fine. but really I think that there's the aesthetic of what's beautiful for women, also what's professional, is very narrow. So if you're supposed to have your hair straightened, and if you do have curls, it has to be the very loose, accessible kind of curls. And when you're born black, your hair doesn't grow like that from your head. So you spend a lot of time trying to make it look like that. And while you're spending all that time, you're also internalizing society's message to you that your hair the way it is, that something is wrong with it. And as I did, for many years of my life, if I was asked to wear my hair natural, I would have been horrified because I would think it's very untidy, it's just not right. I came from so many things that I wanted to do, but I knew that hair was one of them. And I would go to get my hair done in these hair salons and I would take notes. So really there's a strong element of anthropology in the scenes in the hair salon. But also because I felt that it represented a kind of subculture that I hadn't really seen in literature. The African hair braiding salon. And I think that it said much more, it said a lot about other things than just hair. It said a lot about women who leave home and the choices they make and the way they take on different versions of themselves. And the way America is this new home that they haven't quite completely understood, but they're determined to succeed in, right? And so I wanted to try. It's like paying tribute to that wonderful institution of the African hair braiding salon in America. It's a subculture. It's a community of sorts there, and the reason that I think the African hair braiding place in America is particularly interesting for me is also that there's a kind of multicultural thing about it. Often these women are from Francophone Africa. I think maybe 90% of the African hair braiding salons are Francophone women. And then they have cousins and sisters and relatives. So often it's a sort of a little slice of West Africa there. And then you have African Americans who come in as customers. And then you sort of have once in a while the rare white woman who wants to, get her hair braided. And it just becomes this, there's this multicultural subculture that I find fascinating. Because I go there and I just watch and I listen. And I did have somebody tell me that A Bend in the River was the most honest book they had read about Africa, which I found profoundly annoying. And it wasn't so much that Bend in the River is a perfectly fine novel, not my sort of thing, but I can understand somebody loving it. But to say that it's the most honest book about Africa, I think is not a literary judgment, it's a political judgment, and I was very annoyed by it. And so I had a few words to say to this person, and I wanted to use it in the novel, and there was no way to make it work. I thought it worked perfectly to have this person who sort of comes and she wants to get her hair done because she's really down with Africa, and she's read this book that she thinks So I spent, there's a lot of making fun of things in the book, but also making fun of, myself and my people, because these are the people I know and love. I wanted very much, I also wanted this book to be about literature and the love of books, right? And for books to be part of the conversation. And yeah, I felt like I needed to get that out because I really, and and this person who said that is not alone. There are people who sort of have this belief. If somebody writes a book that's, that in its spirit is derogatory to an entire continent, somehow it's honest. Yeah. So I think it's a very wrong reading to say that because something supports your own political prejudices, then somehow it's great literature. I don't think that's true. But you're right. I mean, the question of identity and identities, race, gender, class, home, all of those things. I mean, all of these things that, and in many ways, things I became interested in because I left home. I think if I hadn't left home, I think my concerns would be different. But yeah, the idea of what different categories mean, that kind of thing. Distance is always a good thing, I think, for a writer. Distance from the subject, yeah. I think a number of things have amused me. I don't know if there's one, but I think in the US, I have been surprised that Ifemelo's vulnerability is often overlooked. So people will say, oh, she's scary, she's aggressive, and which is all fine. But then it's almost as though it's almost as though, I think, by writing a female character who doesn't conform to our expectations of femaleness, that somehow she becomes dehumanized. So just because she's sort of aggressive, she says what she thinks, there's no room for her to also be vulnerable and uncertain. And I've been amused by, I've been struck by many Americans who have read the book and who want to talk to me, who say to me, isn't there racism in your own country? So that's actually been the one reaction that's amused me very much, because I think, but the book is about America. I mean, it's sort of like, it's a very defensive way of dealing with things. In Nigeria, people want to talk about the marriage. So many women want to talk to me about the idea of Ifemelu being what they call a husband snatcher. The marriage is of intense importance to many women in Nigeria. They don't much care about the race talk. I've been surprised by people who have labeled some characters as racist, which characters I did not think of as racist at all. And also by people who think that somehow this book is about discrimination, and I think it's not. I mean, just because one writes about race in a way that's blunt doesn't mean that one isn't consumed by questions like love and sadness and laughter and other things, which I think this book is about finding home, about love, but also about, social things. But I've been struck by how sometimes the human parts are forgotten. And I'm as interested in the love bits as I am in the social commentary. I think love is the most important, the most necessary human emotion. Not just romantic love. Love. Yeah, the ability of human beings to connect. I don't know many proverbs, so I admire people who do, because it shows a kind of a depth in your knowledge of the language that I really don't have. My father has that. So when my father speaks Igbo, it's very literary. His sentences are full of metaphors and nothing is ever said directly. And I'm just full of admiration for this. But my generation, we don't really have that. And because my language of education in Nigeria was entirely English, I can't even make an intellectual argument in Igbo. So I can gossip in Igbo, and I can make fun and laugh, and it's sort of and tease. But to say something sort of profound, such as it might be, I can't. And the literal translation, that's I love you in Igbo. But what I love the literal translation of it, which is I see you. Yeah, I think it's very beautiful.